fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to another episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name's Sean Waskrug, and today we are going to be reviewing one of the most anticipated films of the year, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers film with Tom Hanks starring as Mr. Rogers. Now, for anyone who's been following the channel for the past year, you guys all know that I was a very big fan of the Mr. Rogers documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, that came out last year. I thought it was one of the best films of the year, definitely one of the best documentaries that I had ever seen personally. I was part of that generation that grew up with Mr. Rogers. Now, I probably didn't watch it as religiously as a lot of other people did, but he was definitely a phenomenal man who brought a lot of good into the world and who is really missed nowadays with the way the world is now. So when that documentary came out, Mr. Rogers kind of got rejuvenated into everyone's hearts and eyes. And so they basically jumped at the chance to do a full-length film with Tom Hanks, which is basically the adult or the movie star equivalent of Mr. Rogers. He's basically the movie star dad for everyone in America or around the world. And so to see him don the red sweater and play Mr. Rogers was definitely something that was highly anticipated with Oscar buzz going around for him and everything like that. Now, this film is not a it's not a biopic. This is not about the life and journey of Mr. Rogers. If you want to see that, go watch the documentary of Won't You Be My Neighbor. This is about a specific thing going on in the story. It follows the story of Lloyd Vogel, I guess we'll go ahead and roll this into the actual plot of It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. The story follows Lloyd Vogel, played by Matthew Reeves, who many people might know from the FX show The Americans. He's a magazine writer. This takes place also in 1998. And basically he is being forced by Esquire to write a kind of a puff piece about Mr. Rogers, where the magazine's describing heroes, and his job is to interview Mr. Rogers, because out of all the heroes that are on this magazine, he is the only one that will talk to Mike Vogel, because Mike Vogel is known for basically interviewing people and basically running them through the mud. So Mr. Rogers was the only one that said, yeah, he can interview me, and thus that's where the story goes. Mike Vogel is going through a lot in his life right now, in terms of having a brand new baby, and then his estranged father has come back into his life. So he's going through a lot right now personally, and so when he comes into the world of Mr. Rogers, he's a little jaded and wants to basically see if this whole thing is a facade, or if this guy really is as much as he portrays on TV. And when he first meets Mr. Rogers, yeah, he's basically Mr. Rogers, and he thinks that it's a facade, it's fake, and he goes in deeply to try to see if he could break Mr. Rogers and try to see if he could find that, is he really this guy, or is he just a fake like everybody else? And Mr. Rogers sees Lloyd as someone I can help with his life journey and make him a better person. And that's basically the general plot of A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Now, what works with A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? Pretty much almost all of it. Tom Hanks puts on an Oscar-worthy supporting role. And I say supporting because a lot of people are going to go into this thinking that Tom Hanks is the lead actor in this film. He's not. That lead actor role definitely goes to Matthew Reeves for Lloyd Vogel. He is the primary actor in this film, where Tom Hanks kind of intertwines into the story with Mr. Rogers. He's definitely a supporting role, but when he's on screen, he commands the screen. Tom Hanks does a phenomenal job as Mr. Rogers. He's not trying to impersonate him like we've seen in some previous biopics over the last couple of years. He's doing his own thing, but he's still embodying the character of Mr. Rogers. When the movie opens up, he literally opens up with the opening to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, with him singing Won't You Be My Neighbor, and you are just immediately caught in the trance of Tom Hanks portraying Mr. Rogers, and it's fantastic. Every time Tom Hanks is on screen, he is dominating every scene he's in, whether it be him just talking to somebody, saying hello, shaking a hand, or in the more kind of intense scenes where the Lloyd character is trying to get under his skin, and you can see the internal I wouldn't say struggle, but you can kind of see Mr. Rogers' brain kind of, working on, like, I know what he's trying to get me to do. I'm not going to fall for it. Instead, I'm going to flip it back on him and see if I can help him out. Instead of trying to get him to try to break me, I'm going to try to fix a broken man. And Tom Hanks delivers that beautifully in every scene he's in, and really embodies the great things that Mr. Rogers was in real life. And Tom Hanks, definitely a front runner for Best Supporting Actor this Oscar season, and it's going to be very hard for anyone to try and top his performance in this film. Matthew Rhys, definitely going to be a Best Actor potential nomination favorite as well. He's not going to win, but he definitely is going to be in the running, I feel, especially if not for the Oscars, definitely for the Golden Globes. He puts on a fantastic performance as Lloyd Vogel, as a man who is really, really good at his job, maybe too good at his job, to the point where he's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and because of that, he's kind of a jaded person because of it. He's got a lovely wife played by Susan Kelsey Watson. Many people might know her from This Is Us. He's got a brand new baby, but he's so focused on his job that he's really not taking the time to focus on his home life with the brand new baby and his wife. Then, of course, his estranged father shows back up, played by Chris Cooper. And, of course, there's that dynamic, and his wife willing to kind of let his father back in, where with Lloyd that wants nothing to do with him. And also basically kind of being punished by Esquire, being forced to interview Mr. Rogers, and him trying to find whatever he can to try to get some dirt on Mr. Rogers. And so he's got a lot going on for his character. He's got a lot of emotional anger. Excuse me. He's got a lot of emotional anger, and you can see that embodied in Matthew Rhys' performance until the inevitable breaking point. Which, when that breaking point does happen, the movie does get a little trippy in the sense. And some people might be able to follow through with it, and some people will embrace it. I personally embraced it. Once I kind of figured out what was going on, I'd be like, okay, I see where this is going. I actually really enjoyed this, whereas other people might go, this went way too weird for me at a certain point, so it kind of all depends on the person. But Tom Hanks and Matthew Rhys do a phenomenal job working together, playing a nice game of mental chess between one another as playing Lloyd Vogel and Mr. Rogers. Chris Cooper as his father Jerry, in the scenes that he's in, he delivers a strong performance as Lloyd's estranged father, who he hasn't seen for over, I think, 10 years at least. Like I said, Susan Kelsey Watson, she does a great job as Andrea Vogel, playing the wife. Like I said, if you've seen her in This Is Us, she's basically playing the same kind of character. So if you like her in that, you'll love her in this. Marianne Plunkett, she does a great job as playing Joanna Rogers, or Mr. Rogers' wife. Enrico Colantoni, he plays Bill Eisler. He's got some great moments in the film as well. Like I said, solid cast throughout this entire film, and a solid, beautiful story through the what Mr. Rogers' effect can do. I mean, there are times where he's just sitting in a restaurant and everyone just stops and just does whatever he says, like almost like he's a magician or like a sorcerer. Like he could just command and control an entire room, or command and control an entire subway. The powers of Mr. Rogers, because of how beloved he is astounding in this film, and just seeing it happen in this film. There's some amazing scenes. There's a particular scene in a Chinese restaurant, which, if anyone who's watched the documentary of Won't You Be My Neighbor will know exactly what I'm talking about as it's happening. And they actually let you breathe that scene, and it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful scene, delivered incredibly by Tom Hanks and Matthew Rhys as well. This movie is a feel-good movie. It's sad, it's rough at certain points, but at the end, you're left feeling happy and joyful, just like you would watching Mr. Rogers, and they do a phenomenal job with it. What does not work with A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? I mean, there's not really a whole lot that doesn't work. It's just because of how the film goes. Definitely don't go into this movie if you're kind of tired or sleepy, because Tom Hanks delivers with such a soft, delicate delivery of his voice that it can kind of maybe put you to sleep. And that's not a knock on him. He does a fantastic job. But this was the second movie I had seen back to back after working a long day, and he was kind of putting me to sleep. Not because I was bored, it's just because he was so calming with his voice that I was way too relaxed and I started to doze off. I didn't miss anything, obviously, but it was one of those things where it's like, my eyes are getting heavy. Crap, Tom Hanks is putting me to sleep in the best way possible. I need to sit up and pay attention. But yeah, it's a slow film. I mean, obviously, if you've seen the trailers for this film, you kind of should know what kind of film you're getting into. So it can be a little slow at pace at certain points because of what the film is about. For some people, I personally love this. I think it was a brilliant move by the director, who is blanking on her name right now. Marielle Heller. Probably said her first name wrong. I apologize. Her transitions in the movie. She basically uses the Mr. Rogers set, so of the cities and stuff like that. So when they're transitioning from like Pittsburgh to New York, or driving on a bridge, or taking a plane, instead of showing that those shots, they take you to the Mr. Rogers little neighborhood town, and you watch it that way. And they change the aspect ratio so it looks like an old tube TV. It gets grainy. And it's a very beautiful aesthetic to the film, but to some people, it might be a little jarring on the eyes, or they might think something's wrong with their screen, which if you just pay attention, you would understand what it is. I think it was a beautiful choice by the director, but I could see how some people might get annoyed with it after the initial start of the film, because it does happen throughout the movie. But like I said, that's really the only negatives I really have for this film, which isn't really much at all. So going to overall thoughts, if you're a fan of Mr. Rogers, you're going to love this movie. If you want to know more about Mr. Rogers, obviously check out the documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, but definitely check out this film. Tom Hanks puts on a world-class performance as Mr. Rogers. Matthew Rhys puts on a fantastic performance as well. It's one of the best films of the year. It's incredibly well done. It's sad. It's lovable. It makes you happy. It's like getting a warm hug by the end of the film. And there's one beautiful moment right around the third act that could definitely bring a tear to your eye if you are actually following through with what they're doing on screen. And you guys will know what I'm talking about as it's happening. And the movie itself gives you the opportunity to participate in what they're doing. And I feel so bad for anyone who goes to this movie and the crowd is loud or noisy during that point, because it's a beautiful moment to just sink in and let the movie kind of take over you. And anyone who's in a noisy theater, I feel sorry for you for having to deal with that, because you should respect this film for what it's trying to do. So, highly recommend this. Go out of your way to see this film. This is definitely going to be an Oscar favorite going towards award season. So, going into my review score for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Which means that it does crack into the top 10 of 2019 so far. So, going to the list, we've got Avengers Endgame at number 1, Jojo Rabbit at number 2, Ford v Ferrari at number 3, Joker at 4, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood at number 5, Parasite at 6, Toy Story 4 drops down to number 7, Rocket Man at number 8, Doctor Sleep at 9, with Peanut Butter Falcon at number 10, with El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, dropping out of the top 10. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys feel like this review is worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. But most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to the channel so that way you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on Sean's Movie Crusades. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next in a few days, we'll be in Thanksgiving season, which means Knives Out will be coming out. So be on the lookout for that review. And of course, we are into the thick of it with the Movie Crusaders ride through the Star Wars galaxy. Coming up on Monday, we will have Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So be on the lookout for that, as literally it's me defending that film as the best I could against the rest of the Movie Crusaders. So be on the lookout for that. I hope you guys enjoyed the previous Episode 1 of The Phantom Menace. So be on the lookout for all those videos and more coming up here on Sean's Movie Crusades. Until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.